Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I am so glad you're here. We challenge conventional thinking about customer experience because I believe that improving experiences isn't just good for business, it's a powerful way to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. Each week, we feature thought-provoking conversations with industry thought leaders from a variety of backgrounds, offering unique perspectives and actionable insights. Get ready to sharpen your leadership and transform your approach to customer experience. Let's dive in.
Well, I am so excited to have my guest on the Delighted Customers Podcast, a returning guest, Dennis Geelen, who is an author and a brilliant guy when it comes to customer experience and how to best treat customers. He wrote a book called The Zero In Formula. He wrote a book called The Accidental Solopreneur. He's got a brand new book that we want to talk about because I really think it can help people, especially in the area of change management. And it's called The 5 Shoes for Change. Dennis, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back, Mark.
I can't wait to hear. You've got such a creative mind. You're such a good storyteller. And I remember doing a previous podcast about storytelling, and you help people walk through that. I encourage people to go back and listen to that episode. But today we're going to be talking about your new book called The 5 Shoes for Change. Catchy title. Tell us what the white space was and really what the book's about.
Yeah, very high-level concept here is that change is a journey. And if you compare this to a physical journey, you might be walking across all different types of terrain, different types of elevation. Would you only bring one pair of shoes for that type of trip? No, you're going to be encountering different things. You need different types of footwear. And it's the same thing with walking through a change journey. You need to bring different tools, different mindsets, different skill sets. And what we have outlined, my co-author and I, is there's 5 different shoes for change that you need for this journey.
I love the topic. I think it's so important. I don't think we can ever get enough help and insights when it comes to leading change. I guess as humans, we have a lot of reluctance and reticence about change in general. Me coming from banking, bankers are even more reluctant than the average when it comes to change. But share with us a perspective, I think, if you don't mind, that you bring, and then also your co-author brought to the table.
Yeah, so my co-author, I'll start with him. His name's Christian McMillan. He is a brilliant psychologist in Chile. Whole other story there on how him and I got together and partnered on the book. But he really looks at things from the clinical psychology point of view. What are the emotions that people feel? What are the steps they need to go through different life transitions, different things that they're bringing to the table through life changes? More of the business consultant side of things. So I'm always working with leadership teams on, well, how do you scale your company? That's a change. How do you implement new systems and processes into your company without having a negative impact on your employees or your customers? Those are changes. So it's really the melding of those 2 different perspectives together that him and I bring to develop the 5 shoes for change together.
Really nice background for both of you. Why should the C-suite really care? Like, what is the big deal when it comes to this topic and how you see a gap? Because the C-suite really has a lot of issues they're dealing with. And so why should there be a focus on this?
Well, the old saying is, death and taxes are the 2 things in life you can always count on. Well, I would add a third, which is change, right? Mm-hmm. And the rate of change is just getting so fast. Mm-hmm. The last 10 years, we've probably seen more change in the last 10 years than we did in the previous 100. And then in the last 5 years, that rate of change has only gotten faster with AI, with all the stuff at our fingertips now. And that just means that businesses have to keep up, let alone be leaders in any of these different areas. So change is something that, yes, we've gotten better at. Yes, we're a little better at understanding it. But I think we're still so far behind the 8 ball when it comes to having better language around change, better understanding of how to actually lead change effectively. And with the rate of change these days, this is becoming a must.
So let me just affirm what you just said. My own experience, and let's see, if I go back many years, worked for a large forms manufacturer, basically a printing and label company, and they got swallowed up by a bigger company. But we had acquired a company, went through that change. Then later on, I worked for Boise Cascade Corporation. We bought OfficeMax, changed our name to OfficeMax, and had two completely different cultures. That was I'm going to share 4 different acquisitions/mergers that happened. That was the one that had two completely, because you're talking about retail people, a lot of hourly people on the OfficeMax side. We were an enterprise B2B company, two totally different cultures, and it really was very painful when it came to meshing those two. And then the bank we acquired 2 companies before the bank, long after I left, it was acquired by another company. So this sort of consolidation isn't going to stop anytime soon. And so that's just another, I guess, avenue for change that happens. That's a hard reality, right?
Yep. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned when the name changed. Sometimes something as small as that can be enough of a change to really have people have a difficult time going through it. Here's a real simple, silly example from my own life. There was a local band in my area just starting up. They were starting to get some traction. I was related to, or I worked with one of the people who was related to one of the band members, so I had a bit of a loyalty, a bit of a reason to kind of listen to their music. And about 3 years in, they decided to change the name of the band. Nothing else changed. All the exact same band members, same sound, same kind of music and everything. But I was attached to the old name. And for some reason, that was enough to make me kind of stop following the band. And there was just this affiliation with the old name of the band. So we got to be really careful when we're talking larger scale changes, especially if you're leading one of those, not to assume that it's all just logic. There's a lot of emotion that gets tied in with change. Both your employees and your customers can be really tied to certain things that you may not even suspect, like a simple name.
Great. That's a great point. And words and phrases and what you communicate totally matters. I want to ask you, when it comes to change leadership or change management in general, what are some of the myths out there that I think some people believe that are maybe not true?
Several. One of them being everybody will come along at the same pace, or everybody is starting at the same starting point. Not true. Everybody is experiencing these things in different ways. In fact, in our upcoming book, The 5 Shoes for Change, we talk about 4 main catalysts for change. And even though it could be the same change for different people, it could be a different catalyst. We talk about storms, we talk about deserts, we talk about dying objects, and we talk about serendipity being the 4 main catalysts for change. Well, 2 people could be experiencing the same change. For one, it could feel like a storm. For the other, it could feel like a desert. And then the other thing is people are equipped with different skill sets, different mindsets. In our case, that's different shoes. And they might be more comfortable in a certain pair of shoes and more comfortable walking certain parts of this change journey than others. So we really have to understand the language around change. Why are people feeling certain things and how are they best equipped to deal with them? And not everybody's the same.
I love that. I think that's so true. And gosh, there could be so many factors that relate to that. One could simply be what I talked about, is people have never been through a merger or an acquisition before. Whatever the case may be, whatever's changing, it may be their first time, right?
Yep. And somebody else, we may assume, they've been through something like this before, they'll have no problem. Well, maybe there's a slightly different emotional trigger here. Maybe there's a different loyalty. Maybe there's a new unknown for them. Never assume.
And maybe they went through multiple changes in the past and they didn't go well.
Yeah, there's some emotional baggage there just tied to a previous change that was very negative and disastrous. Even though this one might be going smoothly, they're remembering that last one.
I'll add one other one, and I want to get your opinion on this because I mentioned before the change associated with a merger, acquisition, some sort of corporate change. And the fact is that whether you're on the buying side or being bought side of this, for example, if you acquired a company, and maybe this doesn't make sense in your mind, but it was a reality for us, is that the fact is that we bought another bank. Those customers and those employees did not choose us. So they're being forced to adopt to changes, both the employees and the customers, to our system, our way of doing things. And there's a huge risk of churn there. What do you think?
Completely agree. So in the terminology in our book, we would describe that as a storm. It was thrust upon them suddenly. Maybe they didn't know about it, or they had very little time to react to this. Suddenly, there's all these thoughts and emotions and unknowns going through their mind, and they're dealing with what they're considering a storm. Whereas the people on the other side of the fence are probably thinking, wow, this is great. We get to merge these things together. They get to take advantage of our processes and our technology or whatever we're introducing. There's so many positives out of this. Not realizing on the other side, they're sitting there sweating, wondering what's going to happen, what's going on. Is my job safe? Am I going to be able to handle this? Is this going to be redundant now because somebody else is doing what I'm already doing over there? So many different ways that people experience change. And I really do think we need to change the language around change and how we handle it.
Dennis, we talked about some of the reasons that change is hard, change is difficult. What are some of the missteps that companies make, leaders make when it comes to change?
I think a big thing is being upfront with as much communication and information as you can from the beginning. Obviously, there's limits on what you can and can't say, but there's that old saying, sometimes you have to say something 7 times for people to really get it. Here's a great example. I worked at a company once and we were rolling out a really small change, and it was announced to all employees in the department that it's coming. This is what's happening. Again, not a very large change, but a couple of employees, the second they heard that, it's almost like they had tuned out the rest of the message because their mind went to, uh-oh, is my job safe? Am I going to lose my job? So that's all they heard. And if that's the only time you communicate about this, they're stuck with that. So it needs to be communicated multiple times in large group settings, in one-on-one settings, allowing people to ask questions, allowing people to kind of work through what does this really mean for me. But I think there's this assumption that, oh, we put out a company memo, or, oh, we mentioned that at the quarterly meeting. Everybody's aware, great, now we can move on and start taking action. Well, for those employees that maybe felt this emotional surge right off the bat and didn't quite grasp and understand the entire change and what it did or didn't mean for them, they're not along the change journey with the rest of you. So over-communicate. Find different ways to communicate. Communicate one-on-one if you can. Allow people to ask questions. Missing that step right off the bat is setting that change up for potential failure. Even if it's a small one, like in our case, we learned a lot from that misstep and not over-communicating the change from the beginning.
Yeah, such a great point. And like you say, people are at different stages in the journey, and some may not come along till the very end. Some may not come along at all. So I guess we're trying to mitigate those factors to the best of our ability, because change, like you said earlier, it's a coming.
Yep. Yeah. It's inevitable. And it's so funny because we know this. We know that getting outside of our comfort zone is a good thing. We know that changing is a good thing. We know that growth and learning is a good thing. Yet inside all of us, we resist it. We can't help it. I think it's just the way we're wired. We like comfort zones. We like safety. We like the known. And that's where we want to stay. But we also know to grow, to learn, to get better, we have to go over here. But still, we have to have all this language, all these processes, the right shoes in place to be able to walk that path effectively. And no matter how many times we do it, it never really gets something that we're excellent and good and comfortable at. We have to always remind ourselves, time to change my shoes. I'm going to walk this step of the journey now. Time to put on these more comfortable pair here because I'm about to do this. So I don't think it's something we'll ever, as humans, be really great at and experts at. And that's why it's so important to keep bringing this up and learning it ourselves as leaders to get better at it.
So true. Such a good muscle to try to build is this ability to change and be able to transition well. Dennis, a great transition. You brought up the shoes, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about the 5 shoes for change. Pardon the pun, but would you walk us through, at least at a high level, the
Sure.
5, and then maybe we can drill down to 1 or 2 of them.
Yep. So
Struggling to connect the dots across your customer journeys? You're not alone. For many CX professionals, journey mapping is still manual and fragmented, especially in large organizations. JourneyTrack changes that. Their platform unifies journey mapping, management, and measurement in one place, giving you a real-time view of every touch point. uncover friction, align teams, and prove the ROI of your CX initiatives so you can make smarter decisions and deliver smoother journeys. Want to see how AI can help you map smarter, not harder? Download our free white paper at journeytrack.io/podcast or click the link at the end of the show notes to get started with AI-powered journey mapping in minutes.
What I'll do is I'll walk through. The 5 shoes are actually 5 different colors.
Okay.
And they correspond kind of with the change curve, if you're familiar with that, how you're thrust into a change and eventually you come down to maybe the low point or breaking point until you finally work your way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, there's a black shoe, red shoe, yellow shoe, green shoe, and blue shoe. And I'll just give a real high-level overview here. When you're first thrust into a change, you need to absorb the impact, the shock. You need to be able to, okay, what is going on here? For that, you need to be wearing the black shoe. And in the book, we go into what does that look like? How do you wear the black shoe? How does that help absorb the impact? Once you kind of get past that first phase, now you need to take off the black shoe, put on the red shoe. This is where you're going to be experiencing different emotions now. How do I express those emotions? How do I release the different pain that I felt because of this change? How do I experience and express these emotions properly? Once you kind of get past that phase, it's time to put on your yellow shoe. And this is really the thinking shoe. How do I now clarify my direction now? How do I make a plan? How do I really think about what needs to happen next? That's the yellow shoe. But like we all know, just having a plan or just thinking isn't enough. Now you need to take action. So that's the green shoe. Green shoe is the action shoe, where you're actually carrying out the plan, carrying out the change. You start taking action, you start moving on, you start building new habits. And throughout the entire change curve, really, there's another set of shoes you need to be wearing that entire time, and that's the blue shoe. And the blue shoe is all for growth and learning, seeking meaning. How am I growing through this? What should I be taking from this? What am I learning from this? What are the values? What are the higher perspectives I should be having because of this change? So those 5 together make up the 5 shoes that we really need to wear through the change journey.
Nice. I like the color connection to the different stages as they go through it. I share with you offline also, this reminds me of De Bono's 6 thinking hats.
Yes.
And that was just designed for people to make decisions as a group, given the fact that we all have different personalities. So it was pushing us to wear different hats, put on this hat and become this person. Tell us how you believe this model should be experienced by the different players in the group, leaders, middle management, employees. How should we be activated?
So going back to the shoe analogy, we are most comfortable in our own shoes, right? If you were to borrow somebody's shirt, it might not feel out of place. You put somebody else's shoes on, that can feel strange, right? It's kind of molded to their feet. They've been wearing it. You put it on, it's not yours. It feels strange. Well, to that same analogy, certain people are more comfortable in certain pairs of shoes, right? Maybe you're more comfortable wearing the black shoe, or maybe you're an action person, so the green shoe is for you. Maybe you're a thinker, an ideas person, so you're a yellow shoe person. Well, to go through an entire change journey, you really do need to get used to putting on and taking off these different shoes, because one pair of shoes is not going to get you through the entire journey effectively. That's as an individual going through a change on your own. Well, what if you're a team? Certain people on the team are going to be more comfortable in different types of shoes. So maybe at certain parts of the change journey, they take a little more of the load, or they take a little more of the lead. Let's get our thinkers together for the yellow shoe part of the journey. Obviously, we're not ostracizing the rest of the group. You have to do this effectively, but those are the people we might rely on a little bit more. And then now it's time to put on the green shoe, and those people are going to take the lead on that part. But overall, we should all, over time, get more comfortable with each of the different pairs of shoes, because they really are all good for us. They really are all needed for different parts of the journey. I mean, life is a journey. So we should get comfortable or more comfortable in these different shoes over different periods of time. So one of the things that we will be including either in the book or with different workshops that we do will be an assessment so that people can understand which shoe am I most comfortable in right now. That gives you a good idea of your team. If you have a team of 10 people and boy, we have nobody on the team that's really a green shoe or a yellow shoe, is that a problem? Or while we're going through a change, who on the team should we rely on a little heavier in different parts of the change journey? So really just getting a better understanding of the shoes, which ones you're more comfortable in, and how do we utilize them more effectively.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point. Just have some self-awareness of where everybody is in this and acknowledge, what are some of the gaps that we need to grow into as you're moving along this. Can you share an example of, let's just say, I'm in the black phase, and that's where I think I am. And what are some strategies that an organization can use to move people through that storming stage and help people maybe if they have more of a reluctance in that area?
Right. So the black shoe by definition means you're a little more comfortable at absorbing that initial impact. Those are those people that are good in crisis situations, right? Something happens, they're on it. Hey, I'm going to minimize the impact. That's great. That's where they thrive. But you can't stay there. It's not always crisis mode. It's not always, okay, now we're coming out of that. We need to really start putting on the red shoe and saying, okay, what are the different emotions people are feeling here? Let's be a little more empathetic. And maybe the black shoe people aren't the best at being empathetic and really expressing or helping others express their feelings. So we need to first understand that is a requirement. We're now going into that phase of change. So acknowledging that, recognizing that, and then having the language around how do we transition there is most importantly. So I think it's a lot of education. I think it's a lot of awareness, and I think it's a lot of having the right language around change to be able to do that effectively.
You're such a good storyteller. I'd love to hear maybe a story that relates to one of these shoes that an employee or a leader may be dealing with.
It's funny, when we first wrote the first draft of the manuscript, it almost read a little too much like a textbook, right? It's very clinical. It's very, this is what change is. These are the catalysts of change. These are the different shoes for change. And a lot of the feedback we were getting from the beta readers was, can you show me what this looks like in the real world? So we started giving some small examples in there, and we just thought, well, wait a minute. What if we just reached out to some real people, some real organizations, and got their stories of the major changes they've had to go through, and how would the 5 shoes for change apply to their situation? So that's what we've done. I think we've got 5 or 6 different stories that we dive into in the book. One is an example of a church where they lost all 3 of their full-time pastors within a couple months. So what did that look like? Well, first, the elders board had to absorb that shock. They had to put on their black shoe and go into crisis mode. Okay, what do we do? How do we handle this? They were able to very effectively find an interim pastor that was going to come in and kind of make that a seamless transition. They were able to hire a recruiter that specializes in finding pastors, and they kind of minimize the damage. Great. How's the congregation doing? We need to check in. How's everybody absorbing this? That's the red shoe is what they put on there. They wanted to really get the feedback from the congregation. There was a lot of discussions with people. There were surveys. What should we be looking for? Where should the church be going? Let's see this as an opportunity. So that was good. So that was also moving into the yellow shoe. If we're going to be planning the next steps of our church here, what does this really look like? And then it was taking action, putting on the green shoe. Through all of that, the blue shoe was put on saying, what do we need to learn from this? What is God wanting from us from this? How are we growing as a church through this? So it was a great example of, even though they had no concept of the 5 shoes process or what this language was, they were exhibiting this as I interviewed all the different elders. It was incredible to see, wow, you guys really did a great job of wearing these different 5 shoes, and it was a seamless transition for them. They filled all the pastor positions. The congregation is extremely happy with how it went. It was a seamless transition that could have went completely sideways if they didn't handle it this way. Other stories, other examples that will be in the book are people who've fought through addiction, people who have gone through layoffs, other companies that have gone through different mergers, acquisitions. How does the 5 shoes for change really apply to those real life stories? So there's lots of examples of those in the book.
Yeah. I love the church example and the way you describe them, people walking through. In some ways, it's counterintuitive because you might think, well, in this vacuum of leadership, somebody needs to step up and say, here's where we're going with confidence, and maybe a small steering committee says this is the direction forward. Instead, the group was very transparent, very almost vulnerable, and seeking guidance from the parishioners, congregation, to say, what are your thoughts about where we should go? And there's some risk associated with opening that door.
Yep. But with that risk comes great opportunity if done well. I mean, if you put this into the context of a for-profit business going through a major change, well, the more vulnerable they are, the more open they are, the better they handle the change, the better experience it's going to be for the employees. And as we all know, the better experience it is for the employees, in turn, the better experience the customers are going to have throughout that, right? You have employees who are being brought along properly throughout the change, who are buying into the change, who are aware of what's going on and buying in. Well, that's going to trickle down to the experience that the customer feels while interacting with that business throughout that transition.
Yeah. Well done. Very exciting. Always love to read your stuff. Before we land the plane here, Dennis, I want to ask you one more question, which I ask all my guests, which is, what delights you as a customer?
The biggest thing for me, I think, is being known. So that could be as small as where Starbucks writes your name on the cup. I mean, that's an example that's used a million times. But you go into a mom and pop store. They know you by name. They know, are you getting the regular order today? So how can large faceless organizations make you feel like you're known? There's so many different things that they can do to personalize the experience a little better, a little more, and make it feel like you're not just a number, not just a customer, but a friend, a family member, something along those lines to make it feel like a more warm interaction.
Yeah, well said. I think you hit the nail on the head. That's going to be a huge challenge, and maybe a useful application of AI in the future is, how do you personalize that experience and make someone feel known? Very good. Dennis, awesome conversation. Can't wait for this book. Tell us when it's going to come out. Tell us how people can find it and find you.
Sure. So we don't have a set date yet for the book. We're aiming for this fall, so September, October 2025. We're currently in the rewrite of the manuscript, and then we'll be going into the editing process. The book will be available on Amazon mostly. There will be a website for the book and for the 5 Shoes for Change in general. That will be launching soon. So there will be a 5shoesforchange.com website. In the meantime, people connect with me directly. DennisGeelen.me is my website, or LinkedIn is a place where I like to hang out quite a bit, and always up for some good conversation on change and leadership.
Excellent. The book is The 5 Shoes for Change with Dennis Geelen and Christian McMillan. Dennis, thank you so much for being on the Delighted Customers podcast.
Yeah, thanks again, Mark.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.